All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to UFO Seriously Live, where we provide credible UFO information and news. So, we've got a lot of news to go through. Sorry if I'm a little low energy today as well, because I'm still not over that thing that I had last week. So, of course, last week I said that, and I think my energy level was able to rise as I got questions and interaction with some of you all. So, we'll see how that works. But welcome to Open Minds. If you're not familiar with who we are, we're an organization that has been going on for many years. We've got a website, and I think that it's not too much to say that we are definitely one of the most credible organizations sharing information about UFOs, and that's why I think we're quoted in mainstream media more than practically any other website out there, except for maybe the Mutual UFO Network, which is the largest UFO research organization in the country, a big one. So they're great. But let's go into all of the cool stuff going on. First, let's say hi to a few people. So Renee and Rich and Peyton. Let's see who else we got there. Alien Protocols, Film Fantastic. Skeptics Are Us. A skeptic. All right. That's awesome. We love to have that. So a lot of people in the chat right now. And Tim, Earth Radio, can I share my link on your website? Of course you can. Thank you very much for even asking and deciding to do that. So, and then David. So hello, everybody in the chat joining us. So we got some news to go over, some of it which is kind of not as much news as usual, I'd say, just because I've been a little under the weather, so I haven't been producing as much stuff, but I have some, and some really fun, cool stuff. And we do have some things that took place this week that are important to talk about, and then we also have some news to go over. So lots of fun stuff. To begin, so normally I show you all my Patreon site, so let's go there. Oh my goodness, let me come back to the camera because I heard a bing bing. Look, somebody subscribed and we have our cool little guy dancing there. Yay! Love the little dancing guy. So thank you for subscribing. Glenn Matthews, so you can see that down here. Here's Glenn Matthews, subscribe to the site. Thank you very much. And then up here we have some people who have donated. So if you click on the super chat or that tips link in the bottom and you donate some money, then your name will come up here. So thank you very much. Not that you have to do that. You could also buy t-shirts or do other things. But, of course, a lot of this stuff, including this video, is free. So I'd more than welcome anybody, wanting to donate. And, in fact, another way to do that is to go to my Patreon site. So I've got 9 patrons. Thank you very much. And this site is not just for a way for you to help chip in a few bucks. If you can't do that, that is fine as well. I just love for people to enjoy the information, and everything that I'm doing is right here on Patreon. And you'll see in the last week, that is this interview with Chase. So this other stuff we've talked about in previous shows. So go watch our other UFOs live or listen to my podcast, Open Minds UFO Radio. And that's what this is. So Open Minds UFO Radio. My last guest was Chase Kletsky. She is the Director of Investigations for the Mutual UFO Network. And as you can see here, the Mutual UFO Network is referred to as MUFON. They are the largest UFO investigation organization in the country and possibly the world. And they have investigators all over the country, pretty much in every state and in a few other countries, and Chase is in charge of all of them. So she's got a great background. She's worked for the Department of Defense doing training. She's also got certifications on collecting evidence, which of course is very important for what she does. In fact, that's why she wrote this book, Admissible, which is about evidence and what is admissible in a court of law, which is important for UFO investigations because we need to collect the evidence that we obtain or that they obtain in a proper manner. So she's certified and knows how to do that. But of course, she also applies the scientific method, and as she says, with scientific investigations, you gotta let the data lead you. So we talked about some of what she's up to, including she has been able to, and she's going to be doing this soon, where she's going to be addressing a congressional subcommittee on essentially threats, national threats, threats to national security. And as we know from this Pentagon organization that researched UFOs that, we're talking about so much all the time, and we'll definitely be talking about some new stuff with them this week, that, that's kind of the angle that the Department of Defense takes as these unknown objects could be potential threats, and that justifies the investigation of them. Well, she's got 10 minutes with this subcommittee. She's going to present some of their recent evidence because MUFON is doing research and collecting information right now every day. So she's going to show them some of their cutting edge good cases, and then hopefully get even a larger or longer presentation in the future, and start this conversation where hopefully they're taking the whole thing more seriously. So it's great what she's up to. And she also is familiar with Luis Elizondo, and who's the guy who ran the former head of that Pentagon UFO group. And he, is similar in that he says, we got to do the scientific and follow the data. But this is an interesting part of what her and I talked about too. If you listen to the podcast, is she's, I guess, aware of television programs that they may be participating in, or at least one. And so we talk about the difficulty of that because Chase, as well as myself, are contacted by production companies on a regular basis. And these production companies often don't have, our best interests at heart necessarily. They want to share information, but they often feel like they know better than we do. And even though they're employing us, the experts, and so often there's a script already written before you show up. And, she's really good about this, and we talk about it where, she doesn't read from a script. She's like, I'll share information with you. I'll answer your questions, but no, I'm the expert. I'm the one who's done this research. I need to present it properly in order for it to be credible and represented in the correct way. In fact, she talks about one particular show she was on where they tried to have her talk about aliens, and she's like, no, that's not what we're about. We investigate UFOs, which potentially could be aliens, but that's not what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with the actual objects. And so it's great that she does that, and she's learned how to be savvy that way, which brings more credibility to this field. And that's one of the concerns. She hopes that Elizondo et al., are sure to be careful when they're getting into all of this. So good stuff from Chase Kletsky. So she's great. She's one of my favorite people out there. So, of course, you can find all of this at openminds.tv. So it's kind of a weird URL, openminds.tv. And you could get to all of our articles, my interview with George Knapp, which I loved, this video with some friend UFO researchers, and I told you I'd have a follow-up video to this, and I'm still working on it. I just, like I said, I haven't been feeling good, so I've had a few days in bed, and so we will get to that. That'll be really fun stuff to my second video. So lots of great stuff here, and in fact, I'll hit it up again. I've got George Knapp, interviews with George Knapp, Jeremy Corbell, and George Knapp is an investigative reporter with KLAS in Las Vegas. Dozens of awards that he's won. A great investigator. And then Jeremy Corbell is a filmmaker, a younger feller. So George essentially broke the story of Area 51, but he also co-wrote a book called Hunt for the Skinwalker with Colm Kelleher, who was a lead investigator on this, essentially the most credible paranormal investigation out there. So this movie's out there based on the book that George and Colm wrote, and Jeremy is the filmmaker who put that together, so just in case. You'll notice here the headlines are not updated. I apologize, really, literally, after I finish this show, I'm going to update these. However, don't worry, because I already have the stories, so I've got a lot of UFO news to go over. So let's go. Check out the latest UFO news. But you know what? Before that, I'm going to go back to the chat. Make sure there's no questions I haven't answered. Thumbs up, subscribe. Yay, thank you. Yes, and somebody made a point. You can hit the bell down there, and that way you'll be notified when I post something new. And we've got lots of really cool new stuff coming up. And you can also buy t-shirts and stuff like that. So Renee, wow, thank you so much for sharing all of that information. Oh, Joe Frawley made a point here. Thank you, Joe. He said, I think she moved to Washington, D.C. to become a lobbyist. And actually, she didn't. She moved to Washington, D.C. because her husband got a job out there, but it was convenient because coincidentally, she also at the same time had just become a lobbyist, so registered to be an actual lobbyist. So it's super convenient because now she's got the lobbying card out there. So we talk about that also on the show. Let's see. And someone, Jorge Rodriguez from Australia. Love the name. Hello. And then there's someone from Melbourne Beach, Florida. And then someone said New Maelstrom. I'm not sure what they're referring to, but let's go ahead and get into the news. Hey, look, there's me. And you. Let's go to the news. Okay, here we go. So we've got some great stories. So John Greenwald, we talked a bit about John Greenwald and the Black Vault last week and what a great researcher he is. And here's evidence of that. So this is regarding this Japanese airline JAL 1628 case. It's a very, in UFO circles, it's a fairly popular case. And the reason why is there is a gentleman, John Callahan, who worked for the FAA, and he said he was an air traffic controller at the time. And in fact, he was some sort of FAA official. I can't remember his exact title right now. But what happened is this aircraft, I don't know if it's this very one, but a Japanese airline, 1628, in November 17th, 1986, was flying to Alaska, or they were near Alaska. They were actually going en route from Paris, from Tokyo. So they were near Alaska when they saw these two triangular craft that were very near their craft, and then these flew away, and then there was a large dish-shaped object, and it shone some sort of light that was so bright it lit up the cabin. Everybody saw it, and you could see it here. The captain even says that he could feel their heat on his face. So what happened is John Callahan then was, this FAA official. He says that President Reagan, who was president at the time, had sent some people over. At least they said they were, sent from the White House. And they said, give us all this material. And he said, he got in some kind of argument with him, but said, okay, handed over the material. But what they didn't realize is he made copies of a lot of this material. So he has a lot of the material related to this case. But John Greenwald had tried to do a FOIA for some of the files. And like he says, 17 years after being told the documents relating to this event were destroyed, because that's what they told him, I finally found them. So he was aware of only like a couple dozen documents or something like that. And he was trying to get these, and they told him they were destroyed. Well, now they just gave him somewhere around just tons of pages of documents related to this case. And if you go to theblackvault.com to this story, and I'll have a link at openminds.tv up soon after this video is finished, you can actually download all of these files that he received. So something really cool to check out. Hopefully I'll be able to get to this and write a longer story about what's in these documents. But this is a great find. It looks like there were 1,569 pages of documents in this file. So extraordinary work. Great job by John to get all of that. So check that out. Yep, so some really good stuff there. And I want to go over to the comments before I move on, just because some of you may have some comments on that case. So Someone said, well, we'll talk a little bit. I was disappointed in Hunt for the Skinwalker. Very little new evidence, although very well made. What do I think? Oh, I think there was definitely new stuff in there. It's true, but, it was based off of a book. So it's kind of like reading a book and saying, the movie didn't have anything new. Well, of course not. It was based off of a book. But if you read the book, there were new bits in this movie. There were some bits that are really cool from the book that weren't in the movie. And that's granted, but there was a little bit of new information there. And so, so for that reason, and because it's bringing that topic out to the public, that's why I think it's really important. And there's two pieces that are really important, I think, to get to the public. First of all, that this was a very credible scientific investigation with what I think are extraordinary conclusions. And a lack of evidence is a part of that because they felt the phenomena was outsmarting them, and that's why they didn't get the evidence. The second part is that, these recent revelations that this program I keep referring to that was ran by Elizondo, the original version of this program, which had received government funding, funded that investigation. So the government literally was involved and funded that investigation. And if you remember last week when I talked about my interview with George Knapp, he even gave us insight into how a Defense Intelligence Agency agent went to the ranch, had a paranormal experience, and then came to Senator Harry Reid and started this whole governmental paranormal investigation, essentially, the real X-Files. So I think that's really great information that people need to have and the public needs to understand. So that's why I feel that I thought that was great. Although I can understand if you weren't that excited about it. Tim F. said, wow, great job, John Greenwald. Exactly. That's incredible that he found that. Joe Frawley is asking, has Stanton Friedman officially retired? Stanton Friedman is a UFO researcher who was the original Roswell researcher. Really, we wouldn't know about Roswell. It would not be a big deal if it wasn't for him. A lot of people don't realize this. The alleged crash of a flying saucer of some sort or something in Roswell happened in July 1947. Well, soon after this discovery happened, and I think it was July 8th that the original newspaper article went out. I'm pretty sure it was the 7th or 8th, but I'm pretty sure it's the 8th, where it said, the Army, the Army Air Force, which is what they were at the time, the Air Force wasn't its own branch yet, had found a flying saucer. Recovered crashed flying saucer. That's what the article said. Why did it say that? Because that's what they believed they found at the base. That their CO, the guy in charge, said, send out this press release. We found a flying saucer, crashed flying saucer. Well, the next day, his general said, no, that's not true. It turned out just to be a weather balloon. And that's how all of this, and so it was all forgotten. There's a couple little references here and there, but that's about it. Really, it was no big deal. Nobody really knew about it until the 80s. And that's after Stanton Friedman had ran across the primary witness, which was the first Air Force intelligence officer who was on the scene in Roswell to see the material and said, hey, that's not the material that I found. What I found, I think, was truly extraterrestrial. And so Stanton talked to other witnesses who agreed, and then this all turned into several books in the 80s, and that's what made Roswell famous. So Stanton Friedman is a great guy, great researcher. And on my Patreon, the question here is, has he officially retired? He has. But there's a big caveat there in that he's still out there. So he's still doing interviews and appearances. In fact, on my podcast, I have this guy, Martin Willis, who does this podcast UFO, on my show. He recently had Stanton. Also, I go to Roswell every year and do talks, and I have some interviews with Stanton. I have a longer interview with Stanton, his last interview really at Roswell, on this YouTube page here. And then I also have on my Patreon his final comments at Roswell, his last comments ever, his goodbyes and thank yous to the city of Roswell, essentially, on my Patreon. But you have to be a patron to see it. Sorry, guys. So that's the only hidden stuff that I have on my Patreon, by the way. But yeah, you ought to see it. At some point, honestly, I've told people this, and I probably shouldn't because then you won't want to go throw a couple bucks in there. But I'll share that stuff eventually. I'll write a story on Stanton Friedman retiring, and I'll include those videos. But occasionally I'll put some stuff up there others won't be able to see. My next is going to be some outtakes from the videos that I interviewed with at the Devil's Tower UFO Rendezvous. So some of me and my fellow colleagues, Lee Spiegel, Mark D'Antonio, Karen, David Marler. Did I already say David Marler? Richard Beckwith, and my good buddy Chris O'Brien. I think that's all of them. Anyways, we've got some outtakes from these videos we did that are pretty funny, and I'm going to be putting up those as well. So, yeah, and there was a movie in the past that was really weird. That was, but yeah, that was fiction. So, all right. Yes, there was a weird movie. Somebody's saying there was another movie too. And this was a fiction movie about Skinwalker. It was kind of inspired by Skinwalker, but it wasn't really depicting events that had happened there, from what I understand. So that movie, I would say watch the documentary. That movie is kind of, it was a noble effort. But, live action movies are hard to do. They cost millions of dollars and they're just not easy. But yeah, let's look at some more news. So this is some really interesting news. So I just talked about, of course, this Pentagon UFO study that was ran by this guy named Luis Elizondo. Well, he retired and then he joined this group, To the Stars Academy. And this group was founded by Tom DeLonge of Blink-182, or formerly of Blink-182. He says that he doesn't feel he's officially out of the band, but he's just not working with them now. He feels, I think, more he's like on a hiatus. But they started this organization called To the Stars Academy. And there's been lots of news about it. There's, I guess, a couple pieces of news about... Oh, I got to go back because, look, we get a... Yay! The Sausage Bandit. Woo. I love that little guy dancing there. Sorry. Get excited about the little shark dance. But, yeah, so Elizondo came to work for To the Stars Academy, headed up by Luis Elizondo, with a lot of other members. A lot of the other members of this organization are some of those scientific... or those scientists that investigated Skinwalker Ranch, because, this organization called Bigelow Aerospace was essentially tasked and paid to do the investigation. He hired a bunch of scientists, and some of which he had worked on paranormal research with before, Robert Bigelow, the founder of Bigelow Aerospace. And a lot of these guys have now come to work at To the Stars with Tom DeLonge and Luis Elizondo and others. And they've been talking about this new Atom research project, is what they call it. And this is a project to attempt to acquire physical evidence of anomalous phenomena and to examine it. And this is really interesting. They've gotten a lot of criticism for not sharing their findings or what they're looking into and being too cryptic. And so I think that they're attempting to share as much information as they can. And just this week, as you can see, the 27th, what is that, like today? They just released this article that they have material of interest that they're looking into that is made up of magnesium, zinc, and bismuth. Interesting. They say this material has unusual chemical combinations or alloys. The isotope ratios that indicate the material was created outside of our solar system, and or unusual structural composition. In particular, this one artifact that they're talking about, they say they have it on loan, is, they say, clearly engineered with distinct layers of magnesium, zinc, and bismuth. The thicknesses are only microns thick. There's no precedent for this structured combination of materials. It is unclear what fabrication process allowed this combination of material to form. Theoretical analysis shows that the material acts as a waveguide for terahertz frequencies. Those wavelengths normally would not propagate throughout this geometry. One side of the sample appears to be tooled, having a defined contour, and there has been an excessive amount of testing on the material. The true purpose or function of the material remains unknown. So this is very significant because we finally have information about this alleged material that they have from an anomalous event. And essentially what we don't have details as to the background of where this came from. I think Chase made some points in our podcast that the chain of evidence is really important. So, or the chain, essentially where it was found and everybody who's touched it and when. That entire chain of events or chain of custody is important to ensure that there isn't contamination, or if there is contamination found, that they can determine from that chain of events, essentially, or custody, where that might have occurred. So, for instance, what were the protocols used? Did people wear gloves all the time? Did they touch it? Then that's going to affect certain testing. What sort of materials was it around? Was it kept in a glass jar with a piece of fabric? All of that is going to be very important to scientists as they investigate it. And if they determine that this material truly is anomalous, that's when it gets really tough, because that's when they have to let their work get checked by other scientific organizations, and that's when they're going to have to demonstrate they understand the chain of custody, they understand where this material has been in the past, and that they can account for all of the anomalies not being because of the history of where the thing's been, for instance. So it's going to be put up under intense scrutiny. So they're going to have to be very careful about what they do. But what's really significant about this, of course, is that this is an organization of largely former intelligence and military or scientists that have worked with the Defense Department or defense contractors, Boeing, Lockheed, all of these organizations, these big names. And so, it's really the most credible investigation of this sort of thing that has ever happened. So that's why this is really significant. And they feel that they have something anomalous. So this is kind of our football game, guys. This is the big game that is in play right now. And we're able to watch all of this develop. So this is historic. This is really important. I don't have the energy right now, I don't think, to convey just how important and historic all of this is, but it is. So we hopefully will be able to get more insight in the near future. And luckily, I am in contact with some of these To the Stars people, including Luis Elizondo. So I'll have an interview fairly soon at some point, and Elizondo will be at the next International UFO Congress, which is nearly a year away, but still, that'll give everybody an opportunity, you all, to meet him if you come to our event. And not only that, well, in the meantime, I'll be keeping in touch and interviewing and keeping you all updated on the latest and greatest. And and so we'll have access to ask Elizondo questions directly. In fact, if you have questions yourself you feel need to get answered, email contact@openminds.tv or Alejandro@openminds.tv. Email me your questions and I'll get those answered. So this is similar to something that we did not too long ago. One of his very first interviews was with me for the International UFO Congress. And we were actually to the stars videotaped this, and I think they videotaped it in Tom DeLonge's house for us. It was something Tom promised me he'd do, and he came through. Him and his sister in the group, and so I, of course, asked my own questions, but I also asked questions from you, my listening audience, and so that interview that you could see at the UFO Congress YouTube page is all questions from you all. Largely. So we got all of them in there. And I don't know if they answered all of them, but probably 90% of them. But as you all know, I mean, I hope you know, and you can tell from my interviews, I really try not to hold any punches. Luckily, I try to build a rapport to a point where it's okay for me to ask the difficult questions and for them to understand I'm not trying to attack them, but just do my job as a journalist to ask all the relevant questions that are out there that people have. And I think people understand that. And then typically I'm able to get a lot of these questions answered. So, yeah, very important situation going on here. There's another thing going on with these guys. So they are what is called a public... well, I don't remember the whole name. Let's see if it says here. They are a public benefactor company, something like that. So here we go. A public benefit corporation is what they're called, which means that you can invest. And as you can see here, tomorrow is the last day you can invest. Now, if you invest, then if they have returns in the future, of course, you're going to be able to benefit from that. You can see here the minimum investment is $200. The price per share is $500. So far, they've got on over 2,500 investors. We know they've got at least a couple $1 million from these investors, but their plan is to take materials such as the materials that we just talked about that they're researching to be able to understand any technology that is beyond what humans can make. Because as Elizondo has shared, and really as this entire group has shared, they do believe that people are witnessing technology that is beyond what humans can make. That we are witnessing technology that is extraordinary and can do things we can't do. And their argument is that if we can understand this technology, then we can begin to develop, this technology ourselves for the benefit of people. So, one of the things, let me go back to the browser here, is this object. This is a craft design that they believe they may be able to build given what they feel they understand of the technology that they're observing in UFOs, or UAPs is what they like to use, unidentified aerial phenomena. But essentially they think that perhaps from the observation of this technology, they may have been able to glean how they operate and may be able to duplicate that technology. So really important stuff, really fascinating stuff. So let's see, before I move on to the next story, let's see if you all have more questions. Does anyone here believe Clinton would have released UFO info? Sure, I think she would have released something. I don't know what. The hard part with that is that, her husband and her campaign manager, John Podesta, have tried to release information in the past. I think her husband has shared that he wasn't able to really find anything more. Her campaign manager, I think, would probably be in the same boat. So I'm not sure if they would be able to even find anything. So, oh, hey, Film Fantastic. Look, Film Fantastic truly is fantastic. Give me $2. Thank you so much, Film Fantastic. But that's from a super chat. let's see, and get Bigelow to pay for the investigation. Actually, Bigelow's made the comment that he has probably spent more money on paranormal research than any other human in the history of history. And he's probably right. He has spent millions of his own dollars. But right now, I think what's interesting also, and what people may not understand, is just how important Bigelow Aerospace is right now to the aerospace industry. So, for example, I write a lot about space and space tourism. I've got a big article coming out on Den of Geek about all the space tourism projects out there. I've also got a article coming out in the next couple days with Den of Geek talking about the SpaceX Dragon capsule versus the Boeing Starliner. And these are capsules that are going to be taking our contract with Russia is expiring in April 2019. And so Russia's no longer going to be taking our astronauts to the International Space Station. And right now, we literally do not have a craft that can take us up there. So we're testing 2 craft, and NASA is paying for this. Billions of dollars they've given both of these companies, somewhere around, I think it was around $14 billion they've given SpaceX, and much, much more than that. 20 something, I forget, I think it's 20 and 40 roughly that they've given SpaceX, about 40 billion they've given Boeing. SpaceX is ahead of the game, but SpaceX hopes to have their first human flight in April 2019. So that's their goal. They are, in the next couple of months, going to be testing their Dragon capsule uncrewed, but it'll be in the crewed configuration. So essentially, it'll be a test flight that's going to mirror exactly like when humans are in there. Why am I bringing this up? Why is this important? Because if you talk about space or you write about space, right in the mix of all of it is Robert Bigelow. Robert Bigelow has an inflatable habitat currently on the International Space Station that was flown up there by SpaceX. They also have a partnership with Boeing where they were actually involved with some of the development of Boeing Starliner, which is their capsule that will be taking people up to the space station. They're behind SpaceX right now. So even though everybody was like, oh, Boeing's got this in the bag, they literally have built every craft that has taken humans into space. But no, they're behind, and SpaceX is passing them up on being more affordable, but also getting to space first. So they've been delayed. So mid next year, late next year, that's when they'll start to get their testing done. So, but Boeing has partnered with Bigelow. So Boeing, first of all, the Starliner, Boeing, Robert Bigelow and Bigelow Aerospace helped with some of that development. I should say Robert Bigelow. It's really his company. And then Boeing also plans to one day fly people to low Earth orbit platforms that are essentially little space stations built by Bigelow Aerospace. So Bigelow Aerospace wants to have a hotel in orbit. They also want to provide labs. So let's say you're a corporation that wants to do some sort of testing in low Earth orbit. You can buy one of these things from Bigelow, get it up there, and then, pay Boeing to get your people to this lab. So this is where we're headed, and Bigelow's a big part of that. Why is that really important? Because that's what Bigelow's focused on now, more so than the paranormal. It's just amazing that, this guy right in the middle of the space program is also was in the middle of this paranormal research. So very important stuff. Thanks for all the great questions. But let's move on. They never been to space, you idiot. This guy is a moron. So I think he's talking about me. And is he trying to say, like, humans have never been to space? I don't know. I disagree. Whatevs. Okay, let's get into the other big news that's been kind of going around this week. And this is kind of silly talk. And I'm kind of like, I don't know. Here's the deal. So The Guardian wrote this story. I don't know if I can close that. What is behind the decline in UFO sightings? So they're like, why are people not having as many sightings? They say the national UFO reporting numbers are down and the mutual UFO networks numbers are down. So what's going on? And they get into a couple of ideas. One of them is talking about that people seem to not be interested in UFOs so much anymore because there aren't any good photographs or videos. Some of them are saying that there's just a decline because there's never been evidence. One of these guys is talking about how because the space movies are so bad and the spacecraft in them are so silly that's why people aren't really interested anymore. And let's see, Sharon Hill, who is a skeptic, and I of course don't always agree with her conclusions, but she's, I think, an honest person trying to look for answers. But she says the ideas about UFOs and aliens continue to evolve as we project our social and cultural ideas on them. Since we have no single easy explanation for all these claims regarding the decline in sighting, the future vision of ufology seems rather open-ended. I don't think it's dead, just changing. So I think that she's right in some ways. But they're all completely wrong when they're talking about a decline. There's no decline in interest, and they're not citing any studies or any evidence beyond the number of reports. And we're going to get into that some more. But there's no evidence of this. The story of the ATIP group, the Pentagon UFO group, was huge. It was humongous. It's everywhere. We've got serious articles about UFOs in major mainstream media, including, I cite this one often, but the Washington Post saying UFOs are now a credible investigation. Ancient Aliens. So I did get invited to the Alien Con, so I'll be speaking there. This is the Ancient Aliens. If you watch that, they advertise it on that show a lot. But Ancient Aliens is huge. They've got a huge base, people that are still watching that show. So I disagree with all of this. And let me show you a couple other things here. First of all, here's the other article that talks about blame the movies. Just absolutely ridiculous. And then it says here, the decline began in 2014, a peak for UFOs. Now, here is the person who really started all this talk about a decline in sightings and everything, and it's Cheryl Costa. She says, examining the decline, another look at the data on UFO reports. And she's saying that, there's a lot of speculation out there, but she's showing the numbers because people are not representing the numbers correctly. And here's where you look at the numbers. Now, I might add that at least at 2010 and even a little during this period of time, I was actually one of the directors on MUFON. And not only that, if you've been following openminds.tv, you'll know that often I'll write a yearly story about these trends in UFO sightings. But this major spike, I would argue perhaps 2012 was a genuine spike in reports, but this 2014 spike is the same year that Hangar One, this television show that was fairly popular about the mutual UFO network, came out. And there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that that's what created that spike. It wasn't that people were seeing things more often. It was that people were becoming more aware of UFO groups. This in particular is NUFORC. So this is a NUFORC data. But, where's the MUFON data? Okay. Well, I have. Well, let me look this up and I'll tell you what I mean by while I'm talking. But if you go look at MUFON's UFO data, let's see, I've been doing stories on this for a while. You'll notice that, let's see, that's over the year, and I don't have a year by year here. But essentially, 2014, there was a huge spike. And that was from the television show from 2014 to 2015. 2015, the show was canceled, and the sighting reports have gone down. To me, it's not really a mystery. Or to me, it's more along the lines of that just during that period of time, there were television shows focused on these organizations so people knew where to report. I will bet you that if there was another show that was about UFOs and UFO reports, you would see another spike here. Ancient Aliens is a very popular television show, but it's not about UFO reports and reporting UFO reports. So, there's not this focus on UFO reports. And I would also argue that if you look, because we do, the Mutual UFO Network is not really, it is in this article, but it's not really out there as much as it used to. It used to be, there were a lot more comments coming from Mutual UFO Network researchers and people, but it's declined. They do not get the attention publicly that they used to. But I think that, To the Stars demonstrates, and a lot of other television shows. And not only that, the conversation Chase and I had on my podcast show, we get calls from production companies on a regular basis. UFOs are still a hot topic. So I don't think that we can really... Here's the problem with these UFO reporting centers. And I'm not saying they're bad. I think they're awesome. I think it's really important that people, if they have a sighting, go make a report. And I would suggest you do it at the Mutual UFO Network and Newfork, because it's important to have that data. But not many people know these organizations exist. So it's only a small fraction of people that even know where to go to make a report. And if you don't know where to go to make a UFO report, then you're not going to report a UFO. You may go to your media or to your local police, who are probably not going to take you seriously, or even best case, and they do take you seriously, because sometimes police departments do, or sometimes even media does, and they'll write a story, or if it's a police department, then they will send a car out to take a look. Of course, by then it's gone, and so they don't see anything, and then they'll write up their little report. But that's best case. Worst case, which is common, they'll just completely ignore you or say, oh, there's nothing we can do about that. So that's what it comes down to. We don't have a central, advertised, here's where you report a UFO if you have a sighting. In fact, I talk about the MUFON, and I also often, and I'm one of the rare people who do this, make sure and tell people it's called the Mutual UFO Network, and that they're the largest UFO organization, because not everybody knows that. Even in this field, there are a lot of people who don't know what MUFON is. I think that I was investigating and reading and watching all of this stuff for at least a few years before I even knew about MUFON. And of course, this was when I was a kid. But it's just not a commonly known organization. You don't know where to report UFOs. So I think that's a problem with all of this data. Not only that, of course, once they are investigated, only a fraction of these turn out to be legitimate. A lot of them are due to waves of different types of sightings, Chinese lanterns, or of course, if you're near a base, like a military base or an airport, you're going to get more reports. But here's one thing I just want to show you on my stories that I've done on this, on the hot spots, is that you can see, here's what I think is really important, is the reports per person. So if you look, and I've done this here, if you look at the top 10 states of UFO sightings, typically that is also the largest populated areas. So the more people you have, the more reports you have. Does that mean there's more UFO sightings in those areas? No, because there's just more people. So, but if you take it per capita, in other words, how many reports you get per person, I think that's when you really find out where the hot spots are. And at least in 2013, when I did this one, here's where they were. Arizona, Colorado, New Mexico, all of these are usually at the top, but yeah. So it's a complicated issue when it comes to UFO sightings and reports, but for just raw data of where sightings are, excuse me, Cheryl Costa's book on that is really important. So I would look into that. But yeah, she's got this great weekly thing. That's why we talk about her stories every week, because she's got a weekly thing here at Syracuse New Times. Micah Hanks. Hey, we're just talking about Micah Hanks because he was at the Devil's Tower UFO Rendezvous, and I was there as well. And he writes for Mysterious Universe, and he's got a story here about a great UFO sighting over the Carolinas, specifically North Carolina, from the 80s. So he actually talked about this at Devil's Tower. So this is a really cool sighting, wave of sightings that you all should look into. Okay, this is an interesting story. Well, actually, before I get into that, I'm going to do another chat break. What are you guys saying in the chat? Buffering. That's a bummer. Let's see. Let's see. I don't see thoughts on remote viewing. Somebody's asking me. Okay. Remote viewing. It is interesting, and in fact, there's at least one person, maybe more, who actually was involved with the Bigelow Aerospace investigations that was also involved in official remote viewing projects. And remote viewing essentially it's a psychic ability. It's essentially an alleged psychic ability where they took a couple of psychics, alleged psychics, Uri Geller being one of them. Stanford Research Institute researched Uri Geller to see if he was legit. Some thought no. Some of the scientists thought yes. These people then also worked with a guy named Ingo Swann, who also seemed to be psychic. And again, some thought he wasn't, some thought he was. Those who thought he was worked with him to create protocols where they would be able to possibly see things from a distance. So they call it remote viewing. So in other words, a protocol where I can sit here and do some things. Go look up the book. There's a good book by Joe McGonigal. I would say he's one of the best because he was part of this program, one of the first to be trained. And they would do some things, and then mostly it was called double blind. So the person running the study would not know what the target is. And he would give the participant, let's say, a number, 653. Your target is 65321. And the person doesn't know what that target is. But what they do is they go through these protocols, give impressions of that target, give the target out up to the researcher who gives it to the other person. They look at the target information and see if it pertains at all. So in other words, let's say this target was a Russian submarine base. If the remote viewer, the person trying to glean some information and essentially intuitively, was able to, say, I see long, and they wouldn't ask them to give names, like don't say submarine. Instead, give it its kind of characteristics. So I feel like liquid, cold, large, structure, metal. In structure, there's a large metal cylindrical object, those sort of things. And then they would be able to determine, okay, it looks like this person might actually be seeing this sub base. So they would take the information that they have there and verify it and maybe get some information from it. Supposedly the best remote viewers, Project Stargate is the project. Supposedly some of these best remote viewers were 20% accurate. That would be good. And the argument is, well, you wouldn't know if they're right or wrong. But what they would say is, if you're someone with a cold case, whether that be you're in law enforcement or you're trying to find something and you have no clue where it is or what might help this, then you might, 20% might be good for you. So that's what remote viewing was. Allegedly, it was a program. Well, we know there were official, like military, at least one program regarding remote viewing, but supposedly that closed down because they felt that it wasn't, didn't warrant the budget. But of course, some people suspect that it still goes on. And there are private remote viewing organizations and individuals. Some of these I don't think are very credible because it's very difficult. One of the things, and this will be my advice to you all, if you're looking into someone who's doing remote viewing, that verification was huge. So in other words, if somebody gives me a target and I remote view it, it's very important for me to eventually, at least during my training, to know how close was I? Did I get the target? Was I right? Because then they can reflect on, okay, what did I do at that time? How did it feel? So they can fine tune their skill. But a lot of people are just constantly remote viewing aliens and the other side of the moon, or all of these things where you're never going to verify whether or not you're right, but saying, oh, I see aliens on the moon, it's got to be real. So that's where it can kind of get difficult. But yeah, that's what remote viewing is. It's very interesting. Colonel John Alexander was part of one of the programs. He's someone I interview quite a bit, and he was part of the Bigelow investigations as well. Okay, so let's get into the next story. We only have two stories, really one here, but this is a good story. The almighty tussle over whether or not we should talk to aliens or not. So really, when it comes to mainstream science, this is what's interesting. There's the organization, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence Institute. So this is the Seti Institute, which is an organization. The term SETI is a broad term for the scientific, essentially, search for extraterrestrial intelligence. That's what SETI is. And then the SETI Institute, even though a lot of people call it SETI, is technically this organization of scientists that are looking for this stuff. This is what is referred to in the movie Contact, because the movie Contact was about, this early kind of scientists looking for funding to do this sort of work. And even when the movie Contact came out, it was sort of a fringe topic. But now science is really into this idea of looking for aliens, essentially, at least in this manner. And I think it's just a safe way for them. They stay away from UFOs for the most part, but this is safe to have these antennas where they send out signals, they have these antennas where they're listening to radio signals, hoping to hear alien radio signals, essentially. A lot of people argue, well, why would they be using that technology? And I think that's a great argument. But the other kind of partner to SETI is METI, which is messaging extraterrestrial intelligence, sending messages out there. That is highly debatable in scientific circles, whether or not that should be done. On the one end was Stephen Hawking, who believed that we should not be doing this, that if we send something out there and then somebody sees us, then it's probably not going to go good for us. And his argument is, look how well it went for the Native Americans when the Spanish found them. Not very well. However, actually, a large majority of scientists do not agree with Stephen Hawking on that. First of all, there's two arguments they make. First argument is, it's too late for that anyway. We are a very bright planet broadcasting our existence. out to the universe on a regular basis, and we've been doing this for decades. First of all, I mean, just a number of things. The makeup of our atmosphere and being able to read it to know that there's life forms here. Or, of course, the light. Our planet's lit up at night. They would be able to see that. The radio signals that we've been sending out. So there's just a number of different ways that if someone was looking out there, they would know that there's definitely life here, and probably intelligent life, just remotely. Even if we saw a planet in our solar system that was like ours, that had lights and all of these things, we would already know, oh, it looks like Pluto has people out there. So that's the first argument. The second argument that a lot of these scientists make, I might as well come back and talk to you face to face, but a lot of these other scientists make, such as Carl Sagan, Michio Kaku, let's see, there are several others, and I can't remember their names right now, but they make this argument. If there is an intelligence civilization out there that has been able to master the technology required to be able to travel from there to here, then most likely they've also figured out the social situations and are then benevolent and not malevolent. And I don't think that's a bad argument, because even right now, a lot of our technologies are very dangerous. And the higher technologies, such as, when it comes to energy or energy production, like nuclear or others, are highly volatile, very dangerous, easy to use it for mass destruction. So if if we're able to continue on without destroying ourselves with these large, this technology we have, these which we turn into not just energy production, that's what we use it more for now, but also we've built them as weapons. I think it only takes a couple dozen nukes to just screw us all, but we've got thousands of them. So if we end up blowing ourselves up, which is, I think a lot of people think likely, then we just will not be able to make it to that level. So, but if we do make it to the level and we're able to harness these technologies without blowing ourselves up, then we're going to need to mature as a culture and as a society, a global society. And if that happens, then, we likely will not be bringing war to the universe and stuff. So this is a debate that's going on. And essentially, we hear stories occasionally about this. And the main reason is because there are groups that sometimes want to send messages out. And in fact, they do. So they don't really ask. But some scientists get upset and say, hey, guys, don't be sending these signals out to space. You're going to get us all screwed. You're going to get us all destroyed by evil aliens. So stories like this come out occasionally where they kind of debate this topic. That's what this is. And then finally, there's Chris O'Brien, the guy I was talking about just a little while ago, but he was much younger here. But essentially, this is a story in Alamosa News. A new UFO project underway in San Luis Valley, and this is the San Luis Valley of Colorado. Alamosa is the largest town in the San Luis Valley, which is the largest kind of high valley plateau surrounded by mountains. I used to go out there a lot. I've got some interesting stories for the area. But essentially, Chris O'Brien is, if you heard our interview with him just a couple of weeks ago on the podcast, he has got this project he calls UFO DAP, or Unidentified Flying Object Data Acquisition Project, where he's got these cameras and other devices to track UFOs and to hopefully understand better and hopefully get more video and pictures of UFOs as well. And then to have a gravitometer, which measures the gravity, and then some other things where they can better understand the object. So it's a great project. There's been other groups that have talked about doing this and have been developing their technology, but Chris is the first guy to get one rolling. So huge props for him on that. So this is really exciting. And of course, we talked about it on a recent A recent Open Minds UFO radio. Here's proof. Or here's where you can go see it. So there's Chase, George Knapp, Chris O'Brien. So there he is right there. So you can check that out there. All right, peeps. That is essentially our show, but let me go into asking or looking at your questions. Oh my goodness. Mr. Al Snow. Adios, dude. I'm nuking Mr. Al Snow, who's just being a ridiculous troll, and I do not have patience for ridiculous trolls. Boot, bop, boot, de boot. Nuke 'em. Cartola. Hello, Cartola says nuke 'em. Heck yeah, we're nuking this sucker. So, I like the people, I like to nuke the knuckleheads. And in fact, let me show you this. Oh, let's see if I can show you this. Well, I can't show it to you, but there is an Open Minds UFO news group in Facebook. It's a closed group, not to keep people out, but to except for to keep the trolls out. So we nuke the trolls. And what's cool about that is, there's thousands of people in there, and everybody's very respectful for each other. Debate's great. I don't mind debating at all. And I think that's great because, even me and my friends in this field, no two UFO researchers essentially believe the same thing. We have differences in opinion, but it's great to be able to talk to each other and share information and facts. And we often change our minds or we get enlightened. I mean, my buddies change my mind on a regular basis. In fact, if you listen to the show, often I'll be like, hey, what about this? And I'll challenge them and they'll challenge me, and we'll change each other's minds sometimes. So it happens. So there's nothing wrong with that. But it's not good to be disrespectful or just to waste our time. Go do that somewhere else if you want to do that. So I'm all about kicking the goofballs. But let's see if there are any other questions. We'll destroy ourselves like we did on Mars. Aliens don't care for us. We suck. Oh, this is sad. Arnold Schwarzenegger's the new Predator movie is about ETs and aliens and UFOs. That's very interesting. All right. Well, there we go. They're already here. So if they wanted to take us over, they could have done that already. So, and that's a great point, and in fact, John Alexander has made this point, and others have made this point too, as far as, not necessarily saying they're here, which I don't know if that's the case or not. It may be, I don't know. I'm not saying it's not. But their argument is if they have this major technology and they get here, there's nothing we're going to do to stop them from doing whatever the heck they want to do to us anyway. I think that's a really good point. So anyway, I think we'll have to end it there. Thank you all so much for joining. There's some links down there. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't. There'll be a cool little video right here if you subscribe and you haven't, like Sausage Bandit did right there. And thank you to those of you who give me a couple bucks and stuff. Remember, we've got the t-shirts and stuff you can see just below here on YouTube, or go to openminds.tv. You'll see t-shirts and stuff. In fact, look at this. This is a super sweet UFO Congress t-shirt. If you go to ufocongress.com, you'll see a lot of cool t-shirts, and you'll see some lectures, some previous UFO lectures posted at ufocongress.com. And if you want to see some other newer lectures, such as Robbie Graham from the UK, go check out Open Minds or ufocongress.com and check out the video on demand. But all of this, if you follow us on Facebook or Twitter, you're going to get all this information. And, of course, you can follow me on my Patreon. So thank you all so very much for joining me. And check us out for the next podcast. That'll be early next week. And then we'll have another one of these UFO Seriously Live next week, next Thursday at 6 p.m. And then all these other cool videos coming up. And, yeah, if you are going to be at the Alien Con in Baltimore, typically there are thousands of people. More evidence that, of course, there's tons of people into this topic. There are thousands of people there, and we'll have a UFO Congress table, and I'm going to be doing 2 or 3, maybe even more lectures at the event. And I got to say, you know, I'm not necessarily an ancient astronaut kind of guy, but I'm good friends with David Hatcher Childress and Giorgio. If you haven't seen Giorgio talk, he's a lot of fun. He's very respectful, very nice, and he's very funny. He's a witty guy. I'm a big fan of Giorgio as a person. He's a really cool dude. So it's going to be really great to see everybody again. And then there's going to be a lot of great speakers and cool people there. So it's going to be a lot of fun. You could just go Google Alien Con to see more about that. But thank you all so much. Until next time, adios. And you know what I'm going to do? I have my cool little end thing here, because right over there, I'll be putting up videos to watch. So watch these videos and subscribe. Peace out, homies. See if I can figure out how to stop this.